I'd like to call the July 11th, 2022 Board of Commissioners work session to order. Tonight, our planning coordinator, Evan Rieger, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Deanna, will you do the roll call?
Denise Huff, President.
Here.
Catherine Carter, Vice President. Catherine is not present. Liz McNaney, Commissioner.
Here.
Martha Similaro, Commissioner. Here. Ruth Dancer, Commissioner.
Here.
Kendra Zadell, Township Manager.
Here.
Megan Weaver, Assistant Township Manager.
Here.
Lauren Gallagher, Township Solicitor.
Here.
Isaac Kessler, Township Engineer.
Here.
David Duffy, Chief of Police.
Here.
Nathan Crittenden, Finance Director.
Here.
Evan Rieger, Zoning Officer.
Here.
Thank you, Deanna. Our next item is not on the agenda and is a sad piece of news. We learned today that one of our former commissioners, Jim Santee, passed away recently. Jim gave an incredible amount of his time to Upper Gwynedd Township. He was elected to the Board of Commissioners in 1979, which was the role he held for 40 years. In those 40 years, he served as the board president for 17 years and the vice president for 9 years. His main area of focus was the Land Development, Code Enforcement, and Zoning Department, in which he worked with the Planning Commission and Plan Review Committee extensively. Jim was so dedicated to the Planning Commission that at times it felt like he was their 10th member. He also served as the liaison for public safety for several years. One of his most memorable accomplishments was single-handedly convincing the county to contribute a significant amount of money towards the railroad bridge and widening of Sumney Town Pike projects. I remember him during my time serving with him as someone who wasn't afraid to speak his mind and being very committed to doing what he believed was best for the township. He gave so much of himself to our community that we will always be indebted to his dedication. On behalf of the Upper Gwynedd Township Board and staff, we would like to extend our deepest condolences to his family and friends. If we could all now take a moment of silence in remembrance of Jim. Thank you. Our next item is the Streetlight Procurement Program presentation.
Hi. How is everybody tonight? I'm here, Mike Fuller with Keystone Lighting Solutions, and I'm here on behalf of DVRPC and the Regional Streetlight Procurement Program. We presented to you last year, presented a feasibility study to talk about the opportunity to upgrade to LED technology for all your streetlights. And so you decided to move on to the design phase, the project development phase in January. And we really didn't kick that off till we got our auditors in town till about February. And now we're back here to talk to you about the project. We've defined everything, all the specifications for the project, all the final pricing, the full scope. And so we wanted to present to you the project today for your consideration. And then next week you can decide if you'd like to move on to the construction phase, which would be the third phase. Okay, so we can go on to the next slide. So I do want to refresh everybody's memory a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the Regional Streetlight Procurement Program, but then we'll quickly talk about your project, what we did in the project development phase, talk specifically about the scope of your project and the upgrade recommendations, and then talk about the financial results and your next steps. So your next step, as I mentioned, is to decide at your next meeting whether you want to move on to construction. We've prepared a resolution for that, that all municipalities up to this point have used in the program. So we can go on to the next slide and the next one. Thank you. So just to refresh everybody's memory, the reason that most municipalities are making this move is for the operating cost savings. So basically by going to LED technology, you're saving 50 to 75% of your energy consumption costs associated with street lighting, You're also getting a similar type of savings with your maintenance costs because of the much longer life nature of LED technology. And then you get the other kind of softer benefits of its improved lighting performance. We can control light better. There are some control options that are available to you that you cannot do with the older technology. You just can't dim the old technology the way that you can with LEDs. So generally, most municipalities at the end of this project feel like they have a much better lit streetlight infrastructure. So we can go into the next slide. The one thing that's nice about these savings or these projects are basically you get a return on investment. There's many projects that you have to do where you have to spend the money and you don't necessarily get a financial return. In this case, your PICO bills are going to be lower over time. Your maintenance costs are going to be lower. So even after you pay for the project, you get a return on that investment. And I'll show you those numbers tonight over a 20-year analysis period. So this is nice to have a return on investment with this project. Go on to the next slide. DVRPC has put together this program, and basically they created it as a turnkey program for municipalities that didn't maybe have all the resources or wanted to leverage the scale of bringing many municipalities together to get the lower costs associated with that leveraged procurement. And so they put together a turnkey program where all the way from feasibility study through the design phase, which we're completing now, into project management for construction, taking care of all the PICO bill updates, the rebates that you get, everything documentation-wise with the project afterwards. We handle all that. So my firm handles all of that. We were selected by DVRPC to do that work. So everything is really done for you. And you can see that this is the third round that you're part of. Round one, we worked with 35 municipalities, over 25,000 streetlights. This is also a very sustainable project. So those in round one, they saved $15.3 million in net energy cost savings, but they also reduced greenhouse gases by 5,500 metric tons of CO2. So by consuming less energy at PICO, you're creating less pollution also. So this is a nice sustainable project also. Round two, we had another 26 municipalities that were just about done with construction on those 26. They're getting similar types of results. They had 15,000 streetlights, and then you're part of round three, which has 9 municipalities participating. And the nice thing is that you're actually, which is going to be the next slide, for pooled procurement, you're leveraging actually round two pricing. So we had 26 municipalities. We did a fresh procurement effort at that point. DVRPC ran that. And basically, they took the 15,000 streetlights and went to manufacturers and to installers and negotiated through an RFP process really low prices, much lower than any municipality could go get on their own if they were to do that. So with pooled procurement, I just want everybody to be comfortable with, even though this project goes beyond your individual purchasing requirements, if you did it on your own, because this is a turnkey project and because DVRPC did the procurement, you can piggyback off of that legally via Chapter 19 of the Pennsylvania Procurement Act. So you don't have to do your own procurement. It's been done for you. And when in all the agreements that are signed, we recognize that you're piggybacking off of DVRPC's procurement efforts. Okay, we can go on to the next slide and the next one. So we'll talk about where we stand in the project. You did receive a free feasibility study that was paid for by DVRPC. And based on that general assessment of the opportunity, you decided to move on to the project development phase, which is where we're at now. We are at the end of that phase. As I said, the next decision would be whether you want to move on to the construction phase. And then if you agree to move on to phase 3, the construction phase, you're basically agreeing to go on to phase 4 also, which is post-construction documentation and making sure that PICO updated your bills correctly. So those two go hand in hand. So we can go on to the next slide and the next one. So I'm presenting a summary presentation here, but you also have been given a 40-page project specification and proposal document. it really has everything that I'm summarizing in the presentation, but it has all the detailed charts of what your existing streetlights are, what the savings are, what all the line-by-line upgrade recommendations are. So there's a lot of detail in there. So you receive that, and you also receive this summary presentation telling you everything that's in that report. We can go on to the next slide. So let's look at the scope of your project. So your PICO bill right now for your unmetered streetlights, they believe that you have 120 streetlights. And we captured 117 of these Cobra head streetlights. And I'll just stick on that luminaire type for a second. We are going to basically replace those one for one. And we're going to take off the head, which is the old head on the left. We're going to put on the new head on the right, which is an LED fixture. And basically what we've developed is a design by roadway type. So as you can imagine, your local roads and residential areas have a lower wattage and light output in the LED. But as we come up to your collector roads and your major roads, you get higher light output. This is the same standards that have been used for all 60 municipalities that have been involved with the program, and it's worked quite well at these light levels. And all of the light levels were predetermined to be the appropriate light levels through photometric analysis that we conducted for those different roadway types. If during construction, we take off the head and we see some wiring that we couldn't see from the audit maybe that is damaged or brittle, something like that, we have contingency in your project to cover rewiring that fixture. So the nice thing is you leave at the end of this project with a very, complete, sound, very brand new system. One thing I will mention, and I think I have it on a later slide, but I'll mention now, to do this project, you actually have to buy back your fixtures from PICO. Currently, they own them. There's very few municipalities that are in this situation anymore. Most of them have bought their fixtures back from PICO, so they could then do what they want, for example, an LED upgrade. So that's part of our turnkey process also, is we help you with that whole buyback process. So we'll go on to the next slide. Now, remember I said that PICO thinks you have 120 streetlight fixtures right now. You also have these decorative fixtures. And in working with Megan and Sandra and Willard, we've really, we've defined that these also should be on your unmetered streetlight bill. PICO doesn't track very well fixture types in their inventory, or even their locations are a little bit challenging. But generally what we think probably happened is when these projects were completed, whether the contractor didn't do it or PICO didn't do it, these didn't get updated in your PICO inventory, which is common. Okay, it's very common for that to occur. But we, as part of this project, one of the benefits is we get your inventory right. So PICO accepts the inventory that we see, but we have to put these fixtures onto your unmetered streetlight bill. So I will say from the feasibility, you still have a very attractive project, which I'll show you in a moment, but from the feasibility to what we're presenting today, we didn't have those on your unmetered streetlight bill. We actually thought they were metered, because the feasibility didn't have the audit and all the other information associated with it. So the savings are still very good, but your paybacks have gone up just ever so slightly because we had to put these on to the unmetered streetlight bill. But it's accurate. The way PICO works with unmetered bills, it's your responsibility to report the correct inventory to them. So we're doing that as part of this project. Okay. We've never seen PICO try to go backwards and say, hey, those should have been on the bill before. They have not done that once in the 60 municipalities, because we have this instance occur fairly often. Okay, so what we're going to do with these fixtures, because they're more expensive, we don't change out the fixture head like we did with the Cobra head. Because each of those fixture heads could be $1,000 or they might be $2,000. We just do a retrofit kit inside of the fixture head. So we take out the existing lamp and ballast, put in this new retrofit kit, and it's now an LED light source, okay? So there's 23 of those decoratives on West Point Pike and another 34 on Parkside Place. Okay, so that's part of the project. We can go on to the next slide. So we do offer also really your decision with this project is, do you want to move on to construction? But you do have some options along the way. So we have a base option, which is basically to do the upgrades that I just discussed with a photo cell on top of every fixture, which just turns lights on and off at dusk and dawn. But we also give you two other options, manual control options and a network control option. So the manual control option is basically, it's a dimmer inside of the light switch. And we will actually, when we do either of these control options, we actually order a slightly bigger fixture and then dim it down to the design level that we desire at the time of installation. So there's no cost with that adjustment. Our installer just does it at that time. But then in the future, if you ever have a need to go back to that fixture for, let's say, safety reasons, you want to increase the light a little bit, or for some other reason you want to decrease the light, for special circumstances, I would say you could go back to that fixture and make a light level change. So that future flexibility is there. I'll say one thing, the way the Pico rebates work, you're paying very little for that additional feature, because the manual controls have a higher cost with them, but the rebates are also larger and they almost offset the entirety of that price increase. So I'll show you those numbers in just a moment. The network control system is, as you would imagine, all the fixtures, all the Cobra heads, not your decorative fixtures. These control options really refer just to your Cobra head fixtures. Your decoratives just kind of stay as they are, controlled the way that they are, because we're doing a retrofit kit. Remember, we're not replacing the whole head. But when we replace the whole head for the Cobra heads, we can do these control options. The network control connects all of the fixtures together in a network, and then through any web-based browser, you can get to the central management system associated with this system, and you can control those fixtures. You can do dimming with those fixtures, but the biggest reason that most municipalities look at that is so they can get proactive reporting of outages from the system. So if you have a knockdown, it actually, that node right there has a tilt sensor in it, for example, and it would tell you, you'd get a report immediately, hey, this fixture has been knocked down. You know, somebody ought to go take a look at it. Or if it's just an outage, it would tell you every night that you have, you know, and this would be probably many years down the road, but, you know, it would tell you, we have an outage that you need to take a look at. I don't think I have it on any other slide, but since I'm talking about outages and failures and things like that, I will mention that every item, the retrofit kits and the Cobra heads, they all have 10-year manufacturer warranties. Your old style fixture, they usually have a 1 year. So you can tell from the LED technology, they're able to offer much, much longer warranties associated with it. So those are the control options, and I'll show you the prices for both of those, okay? One last thing I'll say about the controls, and we don't have to go back to the slide, but the network control option does allow you to go to another tariff. Even after you buy them back, there's a different tariff you can go to that's even cheaper. So you're going to see some additional energy savings with the network control system. It's not a lot, but it's some, okay? This is a slide I presented a long time ago. I just want to highlight why you're doing the buyback, and it's actually part of the reason that you have such a good payback project, is Pico right now owns the fixtures, and as part of their tariff, they have an assumed maintenance cost in that tariff. Well, that maintenance cost, that maintenance portion tends to be quite a lot, and it tends to be much, much more than you would need if you were maintaining these fixtures by yourself. So when you actually switch tariffs, you go to a much, much lower cost energy cost that doesn't have the maintenance in it. And even when you factor the fact that you would have to now provide your own third-party maintenance, which is the standard for most municipalities, they have contractors do that type of work for them. It's just much lower cost than it is to be on that Pico tariff, and assuming that they're going to cover your maintenance. This is an illustrative example of just one lamp type, where you're paying $200 a year for that one fixture for the energy and the maintenance for that, regardless whether you maintain it or not. It could operate just fine, and most of these fixtures need to be maintained every 5 years. So 4 of the years you'd be paying that, and you wouldn't be getting any maintenance benefit out of it. A much better way is to just pay the energy cost, the actual energy portion of it, and hire a third-party maintenance contractor to maintain fixtures that need to be maintained. Again, you're going to have a 10-year warranty. You're going to have a 1-year warranty from the from our program installer partner, Armour and Sons, and that covers material and labor. But then, as I mentioned, all the material has a 10-year warranty associated with the equipment. Okay, so maintenance on this new system is going to be very, very low to minimal in the first 10 years. Okay, we can go into the next slide. So I wish I had a laser pointer. I'm not going to hit every number here, but I'll hit the highlights for you. But so the second row there is your base upgrade option. So that's without any advanced controls. So the, somebody's got a laser pointer. So, okay. So the bright green column, I'll kind of hit that, the annual operating cost savings. So for the base upgrade, the energy cost savings, and then I do a negative savings for the maintenance, because now you got to pay a maintenance contractor to maintain it. So I factor in a negative savings for that. But you're getting $17,000 in operating cost savings per year associated with doing the buyback and then doing the LED upgrade. Then the blue columns are all your costs. Fortunately, your cost to buy back the system from PECO is $0. And it's because your system is old enough that it's depreciated such that they, there's no value to them anymore. So your streetscape fixtures are actually newer, but you paid for those. So they're not, PECO didn't buy those for you. You bought them yourself. So there's nothing to pay them back for those. But I'll just run across, we have the material costs, the installation costs, DSP fees, that's the KLS, that's my company's fees. And that's not only for the project development, but all the way through project management and post construction. And then DVRPC for running the procurement, running the whole program, they have fees embedded. We are carrying a contingency of, that's over 10% contingency. Actually, what it is, it's 10% of material and install costs, and then I do an extra 5% on the material costs for if at the end of the project you want to buy some attic stock, some extra fixtures, things like that. And then you can see the PECO rebate is $16,000. So when you combine all those costs, less the rebates, you're at $58,000 for the base upgrade. So your cash outlay would be $16,000 more than that, but then you get a $16,000 rebate check. So we show the net cost. And that's about a 3.4-year payback, which is really excellent for infrastructure projects. If you do the manual controls, you'll see you get similar operating cost savings right at $17,000, and that makes sense because they're operating at the same wattage level, all the fixtures, so that drives the energy costs. But then you can see the material costs are somewhat higher, like $4,000 higher. All the other costs are very similar, but the rebate goes up by about $1,600. So it's actually, you're going from $58,000 for the base upgrade to $62,000. So not much of an increase to get the manual control option. And then the network control option, and that's a 3.6-year payback. The manual control option does cost a little bit more to have the increased functionality of a connected lighting system. You can see that the energy costs do go up a little bit. The net operating costs are $18,000. That's because that tariff for the smart lighting controls that we can utilize. And but the net project costs are $91,000 because there is higher material costs associated with the network control system. We price in for the network control system all your data costs for 20 years, all your license fees for 20 years. So it's not like you buy the network control system and then you start getting hit with these annual fees. We've got it baked in for 20 years, just so you're not surprised by anything. So the network control system does end up being a higher payback, 5 years, but you're getting increased functionality out of that system. So those are the three options for consideration. We can go on to the next slide. I'll go through these quickly. These are cash flows for each of the base, manual control, and network control. These are more interesting when you're financing, which you are not. But what I like about this chart is it shows all your savings on the left in the lower portion. These are all numbers that I showed you before. You can see that your cash outlay up towards the top is actually $74,000. That's higher than you saw on the previous slide because I'm not showing the rebate there. The rebate comes down in year one. If I were to combine those two together, that would be same as the net project cost I showed on the previous slide. But the interesting number here is in the bottom right corner. So after you've paid for the project with all the savings flow over 20 years, this project generates net savings for the township of $282,000. That's money that can be invested into other purposes. Okay. We can go into the next slide for the manual control option. So here, your cash outlay is $79,000, kind of in the upper left there, but you get that larger rebate of almost $18,000. And then in the lower right, you have a very similar over 20 years. It ends up being right around that $280,000 figure again. And then with the network control system, if you remember, that has a higher payback, the 5-year payback, but over 20 years, you're getting more energy cost savings. And so that builds up over time. So that one's also giving you about $280,000, $275,000 net savings over 20 years. So if you go on payback, the network controls has a slightly higher payback, but if you go on 20-year net savings analysis, they're all within, several $1,000s of each other. So those are your 3 options under consideration. And we can go into the next slide. And then I'll just start to wrap up here. So for, just to let you know what the next steps are, if you were to approve the project moving on to construction, the first thing we do is we start the buyback process. You already have a buyback quote, but we would immediately ask PECO for the agreement. And once that agreement is executed and you send in I have to say there's a $350 processing fee that I didn't put into the buyback number. Your actual buyback amount is 0, but there is a processing fee. So that's the only dollars I think may not be reflected in my analysis is $350 for the PUC. But we would execute that buyback agreement right away because that's a couple-month process for it to go to PECO, to the PUC, and back to PECO. And we have to wait till that's done because you have to own the fixtures before we can do anything to them. But once that buyback has been approved, we'll already have the installation services agreement, the resolution that you pass at your next meeting if you choose to do that, authorizes staff and management to execute the installation services agreement with our contractor partner. We would do that probably right away, and I would just hold that as the project manager until the buyback is done, so they can't order any materials, but at least it's ready to go once that buyback comes in. Then we would order materials, of course, do installation, and then we handle all the PECO bill updates and the rebate submittals, all those types of things for you. We're hopeful at this point, depends on the PECO buyback, how long that takes, because it could take 2 months, it could take 4 months. We can't control that, and it does fluctuate. If we are on the 2-month end, we're comfortable, or we're confident that we'd be installing this year still, even if it goes a little bit beyond that. But I mean, worst case scenario, we should be done in Q1 of next year, but hopefully this year. Okay. So that's everything I have for you. I went through without kind of stopping. So if there's questions, I can go back and answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions on the board?
Sorry, I'd just like to point out for the record that Commissioner Carter is on the Zoom. Can you confirm that? Okay, thank you. So,
The one question, you said we had 117 street lights to be replaced, and we have 57 decorative lights.
Yes,
Is that 57 part of the 117, or they're 2 separate things?
it's plus the 117. So I think that's 174 possibly. Yeah.
Are there any questions from the public? You want to come to the mic, Fred, and let us know your address and your name?
Yeah, hi, Fred Henkin, 802 Clover Drive. So the decorative ones, they could be on a separate system than the other ones because being in a business district or where there's residents, that could be dimmed or differently than.
They would not be part of the network control system, and they don't have the manual control.
Oh, that's
option.
right,
So yeah, just the Cobra heads have the controls.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, theoretically, there are ways that you could control those lights, but they're usually not. something
I was
that
just
municipalities
curious.
are
This
looking
was-
for. Yep.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Michael. That was a really great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Michael. Thank you for
Great.
being so thorough with all of us.
Just so the Board of Commissioner knows, staff recommendation is to go with the full network controls, which I think you guys know.
Thanks, Sandra. Next up, we have a presentation from our planner, Evan Rieker, on density.
Thank you. In an effort to be brief, anyone in the audience that does not have a copy of the presentation that would like one? Right?
I don't think I have a copy.
They're online, but anyone else? Thank you, Denise. So in an effort to, so the assignment was to discuss density, residential density in Upper Gwynedd, and in a way that would be meaningful, at least I felt, in understanding impacts. So residential density is typically shorthanded referred to in zoning and in comprehensive plans as DUA, dwelling units per acre. That's a pretty common way. Land development plans also refer to density that way. And that, while that's helpful, there's much more to understanding density than just a number of units per acre. So the idea was that I generated two exhibits. One is to study the estimated impacts on a per acre basis of various density options within the township as they would relate to our existing zoning code. And we adopted a number of, which I think are data which is available from various sources, metrics, either demographic, which is a study of population, or physiographic, which is a study of the physical results of the development. Building coverage would be a physiographic. Size of family would be a demographic. And so going right to that chart, the first 2 pages are summaries sort of what the charts are about. I'm going to skip those. We can come back to them if you need. So chart number 1 is density comparison selected Upper Gwynedd zoning districts. So I looked at a number of districts that I think would fairly represent the types of land use and density which are most common in Upper Gwynedd Township. Before we go there, 2 things, 2 characteristics of all residential development in Upper Gwynedd are that 92% of all housing has been built since 1950, and 70% of all housing has been built since 1980. So for Upper Gwynedd, at least, very large percentage of the housing is newer by comparison to older communities, older municipalities, or to a city. Secondly, residential density is a low profile, is manifest as low profile buildings, 2 stories or less. There are two exceptions I can think of. Brittany Point, which is an institutional retirement type of complex, 3 or 4 stories, and the apartment component of the Reserve at Gwynedd, which is 4 stories. So those are the 2 exceptions I can think of. The rest of the balance of housing that exists and has been developed in Upper Gwynedd is of low profile, 3 stories at most, typically 2 stories or less. So then we looked into, down the left side, we looked at various study items, and across the top, the zoning districts. So under R2, which is the single largest district in Upper Gwynedd, it's roughly 2 units per acre, a half acre zoning. It constitutes about 40% of the township, about 2,100 acres, 2,100 acres. R3, R4, and townhouse are more or less a medium density, more recent density option in the last 40 years. They are typically developed at 4 dwelling units per acre. Examples would be Providence Lane, Finley Court, Newbury 1, Newbury 2, smaller kinds of communities. The exception would be the 2 large townhouse communities of Gwynedd and Stonegate. Third townhouse community zone townhouse is Ryan's Run. It's the small residential community intersection of Morris Road and Valley Forge Road. Garden Apartments precedes 1980. In fact, garden apartment development, interestingly enough, precedes 1970. There are 3 sites that are zoned and used for garden apartments. They're about 90 acres. I suspect they may go back to the Kitmar case where municipalities were put on notice that they needed to provide for multiple family housing apartments back in the late 60s, and many of the rural townships did. I don't know all the history. I know that the 3 garden apartments that I'm using to in the third column have been around for 50 years or so. And then a newer type of development, IN residential or retirement option, consists of actually 2 properties. The most notable and largest is the Reserve at Gwynedd, and a much smaller, most people don't know where it is, Gwynedd Commons. It's the little residential 48 units just adjacent to the Weiss North Penn Marketplace. If you go to that shopping center and you notice nestled into, hardly visible, that was actually the first example of a retirement and age qualified community in the township. So those are 2 examples of the retirement option in the IN district. So I felt it would be interesting to look at how these metrics would be manifest per acre. Type of dwelling runs across the top. They speak for themselves. And then the 4 additional study groups would be size of household, that's from the census, school age population from Montgomery County Planning, traffic impacts from Andy Heinrich, who sourced them using the Institute of Transportation engineers. And then we run the totals to sort of assess on a per acre basis how these various land use groups or densities work. What do they result in? What do they mean in terms of impacts per acre, people per acre, traffic per acre? Mostly they're non-linear. In other words, apartments which are 4 times greater than single-family detached R2 district are not 4 times greater in population or 4 times greater in school-age population. In fact, it's a reverse dynamic. There are less. It's simply a smaller unit size, smaller family size, different composition, different character of family group within the various units. And so I think it's interesting to note that while dwelling units may go up, and in some cases impacts go up, such as traffic, in many other instances, impacts such as school-age population are decidedly lower for the multifamily or apartment options than they would be for a single-family detached. Not unexpectedly, I would say, between R2 and R1, larger households, larger properties, perhaps more conducive for raising a family. But that's the graphic on these 4 categories of zoning for use groups. Traffic is interesting because it's we chose total daily, which is often referred to, but is most meaningful typically is, and you hear it all the time with the traffic studies, are AM peak impacts and PM peak impacts based on the impact, the peak hour of the roadway on which the particular development fronts. So these numbers speak for themselves, but it's interesting to note, again, because of family composition, or in the case of the IN district, smaller, much smaller households, the total daily traffic for the IN districts, which are more than twice, 2.5 times at more units per acre than R2, have actually less daily trips per acre. The AM and PM peaks are also less. And then there's a confluence, there's a change along the way. The one notable difference is that for the garden apartment, the townhouse and garden apartment, the total trips per day per acre and the AM and PM peaks per day per acre are higher density, higher trips. And it's one of the reasons why our ordinance calls for typically a traffic impact study when there's a change to a higher density of units per acre. Doesn't always mean more people per acre, but it is likely to mean greater traffic at various times per acre, and thus the need for a traffic impact study. And then finally, in terms of just sort of a brief look at a physiographic impervious, which is building and paving coverage on a per acre basis. R2 is typically 30%, a little less than a third. Although with some of the new pools that are being built and sizes of gazebos, I think that could be on the increase. The other categories are very similar in that R3, R4 townhouse, roughly usually 50% are occupied by an impervious surface. Garden apartments, highest density, also 50% because it's a vertical density. It's a floor over a floor. And then the IN district or the IN retirement option, 40%, and that's, I think, largely because of the setbacks and the lower, newer ordinance written to accommodate greater setbacks and more open space. It also suggests that various kinds of uses, when you see them, when they're proposed, require perhaps a greater analysis of stormwater management, higher impervious surface, more careful about stormwater impacts, where how do you best management practices, how is the water retained, how is it discharged? We have ordinances for that, but the higher the density does suggest that there's a higher need to look at those two categories. The questions on that chart, just as a quick overview. I know I'm going quickly and we can come back to it tonight or next meeting, but just wanted to sort of go through the first chart. Secondly, I thought it would be of interest, it was of interest to me at least, to see how, since 1980, the last 40 years, how the township grew. And what I started to realize that 75% of all the new housing created in Upper Gwynedd since 1980 was born out of a zoning map amendment from LI, limited industrial, to some residential component. R4 townhouse, TOD in the case of Station Square, and the like. And so what I did is we tracked them on a 10-year or per decade basis, just to simplify the presentation, number of units, the category of use, and it speaks for itself, but it shows an unmistakable trend of higher density zoning changes. It's not a new phenomenon. It's something that's been ongoing from the pressures to move into and develop the suburbs from either LI or very low density districts to a more moderate, a more accommodating density. It's happening all around us. And it happened in Upper Gwynedd this way. So these are the notable examples: Mendham Station, Gwynedd, Dale, Stonegate, we talked about, two of the larger townhouse communities, Arbor Court, which are twins and attached, Station Square. All these names are different now. Station Square is now the point of Pembroke. Reserve at Gwynedd we talked about, and then Finley Court, which are the twin house development 22 twins in West Point. So these are, we could then go back into, and gee, how was the density, what on a per acre basis, what did that mean to the township? So that we know in general that it influenced traffic decisions, and it influenced the manner in which you would look at stormwater management from a physiographic point of view. This is not a comment on housing choices or affordability. It's simply what type of housing product, what was the market request, what were the demands that that the township had responded to over the last 40 years. And you'll see that over 1,300 units were born out of the LI district from these communities in based on the various map amendments. That there was other development. And I've commented on those in the first page that supplemented this along the way. R2 and R1 continued to develop to the point where those two districts in Upper Gwynedd are virtually built out from a residential standpoint. So it was sort of a quick, didn't mean to sound rushed, but it's sort of a quick overview of the density impacts per acre. So we look at that from a planning and zoning point of view. So it's more than just, this is 10 dwelling units per acre, this is 1. What does it really mean in terms of impacts on school children, school needs? Family size, that could suggest an interest in parks and recreation. Number of school-age children, youthful recreation, school needs, things like that. So this is the data, the demographics that are considered frequently when we go into looking at the preparation of a comprehensive plan and a master zoning plan. Okay, that's it from me. Any
Does anybody
questions?
have any questions on the board for Van? Anybody in the public have any questions? Sure, come on up and say your name and your address, please.
Carl Smith, 815 McIntosh Way. So when these areas were developed, were there extenuating circumstances that changed, that caused the board previously to consider changing it from light industrial to residential, such as last meeting I mentioned, Station Square was one I know about.
So there were reasons, when you say extenuating circumstances, I can give you some examples that I know about.
Okay.
Gwynedd and Stonegate were previously properties that were owned by the Martin family, Martin Century Farms.
Right.
So it was a large dairy operation in Upper Gwynedd for a number of years. They were downsizing. So when the decision was presented to the board at that time, I was involved at that time with assisting the then commissioners on, what do we do with these properties? How do we accommodate them? And the township also, extenuating circumstances, realized that we were short on townhouses in terms of a protected use. Our solicitors will comment on that. Somewhere the LA case came about in about 1980. And it suggested to municipalities it wasn't enough just to provide for moderate density single family and apartments. You needed to provide for all reasonable options, including townhouses. So a lot of townships scrambled to accommodate other forms of housing. It was a Supreme Court decision in Pennsylvania, and they were left with little or no choice to do that. So that I believe that accounts for some of the decisions in the 1980s for Gwynedd and Stonegate.
So you're saying that this township had to do that to comply, or was that something that was more of a subjective consideration?
I would say both. I didn't participate in the decision-making at that time, so I can't tell you what everybody was thinking about. I can suggest externally there were influences on the township, and that may have been some of it.
But we're in compliance.
I don't know what
Have been,
compliance means,
well,
but
that's the
it's a
question.
balanced community, I would say, without
Right.
question, without a doubt,
Okay,
in terms
All
of the type of housing that we offer here.
thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Van? Density?
You have somebody else?
Oh, sure, come on up.
All right.
Oh, there's two of you. He had his hand up first. You want to come before?
I wrote a bunch of notes, so I don't know if I can read them or not, but I realize that the population characteristics are from 2010.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm assuming 2020 isn't available yet, but would it be possible? I mean,
Not available yet, Fred.
right, so would 2020 have any
It won't, because the Bureau of the Census is publishing less data in 2020 than they did in 2010. Some of that data is going to be anecdotal. It's becoming more difficult, by the way. We used to do school-age population checks, inventories, for studies that I was doing as an applicants planner. And school districts used to provide that data, and they stopped doing it about 10 years ago, I think, for privacy reasons and constitutional limitations. So a lot of it is sort of, we're going to rely on 2010 and just assume that it is generally unchanged. We'll have to see.
Okay, great. And Station Square, we talked about last meeting, I think there was a whole reason why that was.
When you say a reason, it was simply a request by an applicant to be commercial, to look at a tired old industrial property. Somebody said,
It was a Superfund site.
I thought it was Zenith. And
It was still for
a lot of uses could have been made of it. It was
course.
determined at the time, because of the proximity to the Pembroke station, the then applicant requested a mixed.
But that
mixed
applicant
use.
also paid for the cleanup in exchange for.
They had to make the property safe.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, exactly.
So the point is, that's a real exception to this, because that's
It's
like Mendham Station was a brick factory. So, or
Pottery Works, right? Yep,
sorry.
Pottery Works.
Yeah, I had bricks in my backyards, I remember.
Okay.
I had another question. I think that was it. I was trying to take some notes.
If you think of some, just anybody can call me anytime, you know that.
I have some other questions, but I'll just,
Of me or of others?
I think more of the township.
Okay.
So thank you, Van. Good job.
Thank you.
Could you please state your name and your address?
Hi, Glenn Hatfield, 1468 Kathy's Lane.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. I know we're talking about zoning changes and things of that nature. I mean, the township's pretty well built out as it is. I think one of the concerns, of course, is some of the quality of life factors that we talked about at your workshop, actually. But I think one of my big questions is, as we go into like a zoning change, shouldn't we be doing some kind of economic evaluation, traffic studies, how it's going to truly impact the community, police department, hospitals, things of that nature? I don't know if that's been done yet, or how close we are to making a zoning change, but that would be of interest to me. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Van? Well, for Van about this specific density topic, we're good? Okay.
Thank you.
Van, thank you so much. That was great. Okay, moving right along, we will be recognizing Officer Brinkman for his 25 years of service to the township at our business meeting on the 19th. Hopefully, he'll be able to join us. Lauren, do we have any executive sessions?
We do. The board met in executive session on July 6th to discuss matters of personnel and collective bargaining. And the board met earlier this evening to discuss items of personnel.
Thank you. Next up, we have our public comments. I want to thank you in advance for respecting the 5-minute rule and practicing decorum. We'd like to make a clarification about this section of the agenda. This section is for residents to make public comments. It's not a question and answer section. If you have a pressing question that you would like to pose, if you notice on our registry form, there's now a space for email as well as cell number. So if you really feel it is important to pose that question during the section, what we'll do is we'll write down that question and we will reach out to you as soon as possible with an answer, as we want to make sure that it is correct and it is complete. We are not trying to discourage you from asking questions like we just did, like the community just did in response to specific agenda items. When those come up in a meeting, like they just did, feel free to come to the podium, state your name and address, and ask any questions related to that specific line item. If we don't know the correct and complete answer, we will reach out to you the following week with the specifics. Please just make sure that we have your email and cell number. All right, let's begin the public comment section with Tom Borneman.
Tom Borneman, resident, 722 Green Street, also chairman of Upper Gwynedd Republican Committee. I'm here tonight to let you know that myself and our committee are coming to these meetings because we believe most, if not all, of the things you are doing as a Board of Commissioners is wrong. It appears that you have been trying to bring all of your National Democratic Party agenda, which you obviously support, to our township. Your own survey in the 2040 comprehensive plan that you always refer to tells us that 90% of the respondents said they believe that the current zoning as it is what Upper Gwynedd Township is what made Upper Gwynedd Township an excellent place to live. We will continue to ask these questions because we want the entire community to know that most of what you are attempting to do is not wanted here by most of those of us who currently live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next up is Carl Smith.
Carl Smith again, 815 McIntosh Way. A few observations I'd like to make tonight. Since I've been engaged in seeing how you folks are operating, when it comes to this land tract development in Pembroke, when I first came here, I heard reaction was, you're overreacting to the citizens. This is early in the process. There's nothing to see here. We got this handled. Go home, don't worry about it, was what was unsaid, but that was the message. Well, then we kept coming back here asking questions. And when you were confronted with a question from my wife about the Walters Group, who specializes in high density, lower income housing from New Jersey, the reaction from you, Sandra, was, we have to entertain, we're mandated actually, to entertain any and all solicitations. I don't believe that. It's no way possible you could do that. And how does this place in New Jersey even know about Upper Gwynedd? So it's clear that the effort is underway to do what you say you're not doing, or trying to make us believe you're not doing. But I guess the question, rhetorical question, Denise, you don't have to actually answer this, but the question is, where does this mindset stop of taking light industrial, converting it to residential, so you can bring in the high density housing? Does it stop at Pembroke? Does it continue on to Merck? Where does it go? Does it go to the Martin property? So we're bringing these things up now because we don't want to be caught in the same position the Martin family was caught in, which was at the 11th hour, you're going to take their land. So we're here. We're going to be here. We want answers. We don't seem to get clear answers from this board when it comes to this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Next up is Linda Smith.
Hi, Linda Smith, 815 McIntosh Way. I guess I didn't ask Van questions because I thought that this was a planning meeting and I thought we were able to ask questions at this meeting. This is my first time at a planning commission meeting. So I guess I'll just make a statement. This is about the DVRPC and their growth projections for Upper Gwynedd. I just was wondering how they developed the growth number and if it's valid. And why we should give them any consideration. I think the residents here in Upper Gwynedd have spoken through the survey. They are fine with the way it is being developed. They don't wish to get any more developing in the township. And looking at this map, we are done. We don't need to bring in high density, income restricted housing in Upper Gwynedd, and especially right in the middle of an industrial center. So I think the tax-paying citizens should have the consideration, and the DVRPC and the Montgomery County Planning Commission should not. I mean, we don't want it to grow anymore. They don't have any legal clout, so why are we even considering that? I'm very, very concerned that this high-density housing, I mean, what you've talked about, Van, with Stonegate and Gwynedd, they're upper income places. We're talking about income restricted housing. And I am unsure of what that is going to start developing. If we start in this light industrial in Pembroke, as Carl had said, where is this going to end? Are we going to have another area and another area? I know this is going on in other townships, and I do not want it to see happening in Upper Gwynedd Township. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Linda, I just wanted to clarify for you, though, this isn't a planning commission meeting. This is a work session meeting. It's one of the 2 board meetings we have with the public every month. Planning commission is usually the second Wednesday of the month, but you're welcome to attend as well. There's not going to be coincidentally a planning commission meeting this month just because there wasn't any immediate business. But it will return in August, probably on the second Wednesday of the month. And that'll be on our website. It'll be on our social media advertising. Did you want to meet in person?
No, I wanted to come where I could talk to all of you.
Okay. We could have office hours for you. We could have our manager could be there and 2 of our commissioners could be there if you'd like to do that. Oh, yeah, we could come, absolutely. We have conference rooms that are very similar to a corporate setting.
Are there any meetings during the month?
I'm going to have to ask everybody to stop shouting from the back of the room because this is being recorded and the mic can't pick you up from the back of the room.
Having a hard time getting an answer.
And the public comment session, as President Hull said at the beginning of public comment, is for public comment. It is not there is no requirement to answer questions, particularly if, let me finish, particularly if the board does not have the answers readily available. What they can do is direct staff to answer questions. They can direct myself to answer questions, but there's no requirement that there be immediate answers to questions.
Thank you. Fred Hankin, 802 Clover Drive. I'm a bit concerned. I'm going to continue with Linda's point is this is being recorded, correct? So we go to a conference room, have a meeting, it's kind of in that room and doesn't leave that room. Is that correct? In
Yes.
other words, how does a Dan Sokol or how does anybody hear about the answers to the questions we're asking if we're sitting in some back room having coffee? So for you to limit our ability to have questions asked and having answers given to us, you are stomping on our ability to get this stuff published to the rest of the public. You're basically saying, let's go meet somewhere else. Let's go have coffee. Let's discuss that coffee. That's not how this works. We're here because we need answers and we're looking for answers. And you're just saying, just shove you in a conference and we'll meet, whenever. That's not how this works. We have questions. We would like some answers. I don't think we're being unreasonable. Does anyone like to comment on that? Or I guess we're not at a Q&A here where we can only make comments, but I find that to be atrocious, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Lauren, you wanted to clarify something?
Certainly. There was a question earlier regarding something that the manager had said regarding land development proposals. When a land development proposal is submitted to the township, we are required by the municipality's planning code to hear that application, consider that application within a certain time frame. So despite any representation this evening, it is correct that we are required to hear proposals from land development applicants. And we do not propose developments to applicants. Applicants propose developments to the township, which the board will then consider.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to make a public comment who didn't come in time to sign up? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Second comment.
Sure.
I didn't hear an answer to Fred's question. When do we get to get an answer to a question on the record, aside from in the back room or at coffee or having tea or having breakfast?
I don't know that we,
Getting
I don't know
invited
that we
to?
offered, I don't know that we offered coffee to your breakfast.
Well,
I
you're
think the options that we're telling you that we think will be the most productive are to either have a meeting with anyone that you would like to have a meeting with in the township, on the township staff, are to have an email exchange, are to have a phone call, if you would prefer that. Like I said, if you want to pose the questions at this public meeting during that specific public comment section, you're more than welcome to. If you ever have any questions about specific agenda items that are on the agenda, you're more than welcome to pose those, and we will try to answer those to the best of our ability. Again, if we don't feel like we can give you a complete and a correct answer, we will reserve the right to say, We'd like to get back to you so we can give you those thorough answers. We don't want to give you wrong answers, is the bottom line.
I understand that, but I'm still waiting to hear an answer to when we can ask you a question about an issue on the agenda and you can give us an answer in a public meeting. That's a yes or no answer.
Mr. Boardman, I think that she said that if, say it's item number 30 on the agenda, if you ask a question at that point, we will attempt to answer the question.
I understand that, but that's, you're not getting my point. Fred's point is, we're asking you a question in a public setting, and we expect an answer in a public setting.
I think the question has been asked and answered multiple times at this point.
I'm sorry?
The question has been asked and answered multiple times at this question.
I need to hear it one more time because I don't
The
understand
question
the
has been asked
answer.
and answered multiple times. The township will do everything in its control to get the answers that it believes it can get within the constraints that we're allowed.
And,
Mr. Henkin, I've asked you several times to not shout out from the back of the room. And again, this has been turning into a dialogue, and this is a public comment period. The board has
I
answered
just
questions
gave you
multiple
a
times.
comment, and I
It has
want
been
an
asked and
answer.
answered. If you have another question, we'd be happy to consider that, or if you have further comment.
Okay, well, that's on the record then. You do not have an answer to that question.
Thank you. Moving on. Oh, sorry, Mike. I didn't see your hand before.
Right. Mike Thometh, 112 Cardinal Way. I've mentioned this before. To keep a meeting civil, I believe all comments should be directed to the chair. There should not be any inner talk between the crowd with reference to the discussion going on. There should not be any personal comments made. It should be civil. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Moving on. We have had a long meeting tonight, Sandra. I am going to, usually you're the first person to start this. I'm going to turn the meeting over to our manager, Sandra Zito.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't instantly pivot, but we will be discussing at the July 19th meeting, a public hearing to consider ordinance 2022-02. This is the Sumneytown Pike Infill and Traffic Management Overlay District. This specific overlay district was created, but it's a zoning overlay district, but there is no map attached to it. So it's sort of what's referred to as a floating zoning area. So because there's no map attached to it, and because at this point we're cleaning up our zoning regulations, the planning director has recommended that we take this action. Are there any questions?
Was that that was the zoning that I gave to Mr. Hatfield?
I mean, I don't know what you gave
Yeah,
him, but yeah,
So,
probably.
so that one we're going to be taking that one off because it's just not,
It's not attached to any parcels, so there's
no
like
map, just
there's
wording.
text, but no wording, so it doesn't affect anyone, so why have it?
all right. And when was that originally done? Was that 5-6 years ago? 5 years
So
ago?
I've been here 3 years, and I think that the text amendment was passed before or right around the beginning of
Yeah.
funding. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, Van, you are up with your report.
Thank you. This I can go through very quickly unless you have a question. Stop me anytime. MCIU 375 Morris Road, the outcome was it was a public hearing, the map amendment was adopted by the board. And there is no new applications, no new information from MCIU, from the township. I understand there is the one item pending is would be action by the board to amend the deed restriction on the property, which they had said they would do as part of the testimony. Text amendment and map amendment, 1500 Pembroke Parkway. This is me saying, guys, when we have an answer, I'll be the first guy to tell you at a public meeting. At the moment, there is no draft to consider. The board has not seen a draft. 1500 Pembroke Parkway, 44 dwelling units, TOD amendment per the comprehensive plan. Nothing further to talk about on that at this time. There will be perhaps sometime in the future. That would be the appropriate time to ask the board a question, if I might say. The rest are ZHB matters. The results were Sanctuary United Methodist Church that was considered by the board and approved June 28th. The applicants had rescinded, revoked the request to increase the flip rate, and with that request amended, the balance of the application was approved. The others were 2210, 1042 Dickerson, dimensional variance for a driveway, approved. Special exception, which by the way is for Little Sprouts 2. Those of you that may know Little Sprouts are right next to the Township building there, have such a waiting list that they've requested and have preliminarily received approval for a second daycare at 201 Church Road, which is now owned by Volpe. It's the former Abundant Life Church. 1975 Blue Fox Drive dimensional variance for a shed and sunroom. It was actually an elevated pool and a sunroom, approved. 1192 Dickerson, shed in the front yard. They have two front yards. It's a corner property. They had unique circumstances. That was approved. And then pending July 26th, the next hearing 2 weeks from tomorrow would be 322 Gosling. That's for a request to increase the building coverage to allow an additional shed in the rear yard of a residential property. Are there questions?
I have a few. First with 1500 Pembroke Parkway. Did anybody any resident have any questions about 1500 Pembroke Parkway? Or would like to go on the record about 1500 Pembroke Parkway, about density, about we're built out enough. Now would be the time to talk about that property. So, all right, President Hull, is that okay? Because he has a question.
Yeah.
Now would be time to ask the question about that property.
Okay.
Where Van is here and we can give you your answer.
Good.
Just your name
So,
and address again, sorry.
Carl Smith, 815 McIntosh Way. Last meeting, Denise, when my wife mentioned it was high density, you said as she's walking off, it's not high density. So, Van, I'm reading the report, it's 44 units. And so what is high density? What is same density? We keep having this back and forth. It's high density as far as I'm concerned, because you're putting a one building apartment building up with 44 units in it, the way I'm understanding it.
Okay. So in the world of Upper Gwynedd, it
I'm
would.
sorry, Megan, can you put up Van's part about the dwelling units per acre? That will help us follow along with that.
Oh, thanks. So
The other one, yes,
that chart.
yep.
So it would be a version of the garden apartments, which is the TOD as currently, the thinking would be the current TOD has 11 dwelling units per acre. We wouldn't be changing that in the text amendment. If it goes through, it would still be 11 dwelling units per acre. We would anticipate the demographics, the traffic impacts to be similar, if not identical, to the GA district. Smaller units, smaller, it would be, I think, a rental accommodation. The expectation would be, Carl, that because the TODs anticipate some synergism or relationship to a commuter rail station, that some of the traffic impacts upon the highways would be exported to, that is, it would be a walking or a short travel to the train station. The whole idea of TOD is to create an efficiency of residential proximity to effective transportation. But again, as I had said, while it's at 11 dwelling units, the impacts on household size, size of household, school-age population, and traffic would not be on a straight line. And we could sort of look at it and calculate it.
But you're putting 11 dwellings per acre, which is 2.8 acres, so we're at still 44 units roughly.
It would be, no, it's a little over 4 acres, so it's 4 times 11. At the moment, that's what is contemplated.
But that's, the footprint of the building is not over 4 acres. It's a
No,
single.
no, of
it's a-
course, it would be less, far less than that. It would be accommodated within the 4 acres.
Well, the additional concern, obviously, is this term that keeps coming up, income restricted. It's low income, let's be honest. So that's the other part we're hearing. So when you combine the two components, it's alarming.
Okay. Well, as a planner, I can tell you that one of my goals and one of my code of ethics is to support a balanced housing supply for all people. So for me, well, it might sound alarming to you. It does not sound alarming to me. It sounds like an issue that ought to be contemplated, ought to be considered by any municipality. I don't know how the commissioners are going to vote on this, and they haven't even seen the written text. But preparing and so the whole idea of mixed housing types is to accommodate various needs. The Waters Group has experience with the Mount Laurel decision in New Jersey of accommodating, and I would call it moderate income housing. And they are the applicants, or they're among one of the, I guess they represent the application at this point. Maybe. So nothing's firm yet. In fact, we're not even sure whether it's going to go forward. It could.
No, but what I'm
On the agenda, that would be the time that we'll be more than happy to show you the words and show you the map. And
what I'm hearing you say is your mindset is it's good to have low income housing, higher density housing to give a more balanced housing allowances or options for folks, even though you earlier told me that we are in compliance with whatever edict or mandate we need to be in order to offer a balanced, affordable housing. So that's what we've been concerned about right from the beginning, and you're validating that. So I guess thanks for that. At least we got that answer.
I want to add something to what Mr. Reeker has said, and he made an important point as to that he's not sure what the board's going to do with this. The ordinance that's being discussed and the development that's being discussed has not come in front of this board yet. It would be inappropriate and ill-advised for any of the 5 elected officials to discuss how they plan on voting on an ordinance that they have not seen yet. So that's why there's not clear answers as to what direction the board's going, because they haven't seen the application yet. They haven't seen the ordinance. Dan has seen the ordinance, and so he's reviewed it, and he's a planner. But ultimately, the decision on the ordinance and the development will be up to the 5 elected officials. And unless and until that ordinance is placed in front of the board, it is inappropriate and premature for them to comment on what the results of that vote will be.
Like I said before, we don't want to be caught in the same position the Martins were. And obviously, this idea has got legs in the governing body of this township because we're getting the information, but I'll make it clear, it's not coming from you. Thank you.
Dan, have you completed your
Am I
report?
finished? Well, I have, unless there are additional questions. Up there we go.
Linda Smithy, 15 Macintosh Way. When did this all begin? Because I'm really kind of confused. When we first came here a few months ago, it was early, nothing was done. And this seems like this has been a process that's been going on. When did this begin with this consideration? I mean, you've gotten to the point where you got the Walters Group. So the Walters Group comes out of New Jersey to Little Upper Gwynedd for 3 acres. How? I don't even understand why they would even be interested. And when did they start proposing this project?
I would say it was about 10 to 12 months ago. They came in very informally to the Plan Review Committee. That's the way things work, the way they start. And they discussed their observations of the comprehensive plan, their interest in building in Upper Gwynedd. They had some ideas. They had retained an architect to show visuals, not to the board, but to the Plan Review Committee, the staff, and to the commissioners. We looked at them, and when that happens, typically what I do is I put it on an agenda item for the rest of the board because they haven't seen it.
And the
So
public.
At least 3 of them haven't really know very little about this conversation because it hasn't, as to Lauren's point, hasn't come to them. And the text and map amendment would be an overlay. It would be an option. An overlay is 2 tiers, still zoned LI, and it would have the option, should there be an applicant interested in building this, in this case, residential option on this, and everybody said it's 4.1 acres, and it's about 4 acres. But that's what we're talking about.
Okay. I mean, we are very close to Lansdale Borough, and we have a building on Broad Street. And right across from us is a huge amount of apartments going in. I mean, Lansdale, it's right next door to us. And to accommodate the transit, you know, TOD that you'd like to do. Also looking at Station Square, when you go by it, there's tons of cars in there. So it's not like they're just using the train. So it could work for trains or it may not. And then looking at this map here, we are 90% built out. I mean, if a builder comes from New Jersey and we say, okay, you can build in our light industrial, we might be getting swarms of builders wanting to continue to build in the light industrial districts. And where does it stop? Where does it end? That is my concern. So we change this, we change it through a text amendment, spot zoning, whatever you want to call it, and then all of a sudden we got another area and another area, and we keep increasing it. We have already fulfilled the housing expectation, the fair housing expectation for our township. We don't have to continue on, in my opinion, to accommodate that. And given the fact that we're right next to Lansdale Borough, that is, you know, has many opportunities for that high density housing. So like I said, like we keep coming back to the 2040 plan. The residents are happy. We want to keep the residents happy. We as residents are paying taxes. We are paying, we are supporting this township in not just our money, but in our community, our volunteering, and it's a great place to live. And that's what we just want to keep it that way. So that's, and if I do have a further question, Van, do you mind if I do call you?
Not at all. Call me anytime.
Thank you very much.
Dan, I have a question. Linda kind of touched on it. How do builders, they really just call you out of the blue and say, hey, we saw this in Upper Gwynedd and
Sometimes,
what?
I mean, they have a brokered network. They look at, they're invited by developer landowners. They're searched attractive places, attractive opportunities. They typically seek out places like Upper Gwynedd, Middle Montgomery County, good schools, good places to live. The reason many of us moved here years ago, so builders recognize those characteristics, and so they're on the look. And we field a lot of questions, and this particular applicant went further than just asking questions, but came in with a, how about this? They got the comprehensive plan, they reviewed it, they had a chance to look at it and understood that there was a vacant, this would apply to only vacant properties in the LI district. At the moment, I can't think of any, might be wrong, but I can't think of another, at least in the half-mile radius from the Pembroke station, that would qualify, even qualify. So the criteria of the ordinance, if it moves forward, would be self-containment. In other words, in order to qualify, you'd have to be this, you'd have to be within a half-mile radius, you'd have to be a vacant property, not a developed property. It would be self-controlling if it gets that far. Again, I'm speaking from my point of view, and I'm simply, as a zoning guy and a planning guy, hear things and bring ideas and thoughts to the township officials, and sometimes they like them, sometimes they reject them. In this case, the board really hasn't seen the official application.
And just to add to that, sometimes it takes years for an application to develop into something actually happening, that the board may consider. So I think I mentioned, which Mr. Smith commented on, I mentioned the municipalities planning code at our last meeting when I said we do have to entertain development, which I can send to you so you can see that I was telling the truth. And additionally, we have a 90-day clock on those formal applications for land development. In this case, I don't know if they've waived the 90-day clock or if we haven't moved to land development because we're only in a zoning consideration, which doesn't have a
That
time,
amendment doesn't have this.
doesn't have a deadline. So we're taking our time, and the purpose of taking that time is so that you guys can have input as well. And it will never come before the board in a way, like I know you mentioned you were concerned about, you don't want to be surprised. You won't be surprised, just like you saw it on this agenda, it will always be on an agenda for formal board action.
And any kind of zoning ordinance would have to be advertised. the tract would have to be posted, neighbors would be notified, so this.
And that's
it's a
all
formal hearing.
per the municipality's planning code, where the
Yes.
laws, it's a law and it's regulated.
That we are required to follow.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Liz, I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow people to ask questions, because I think that's the way we should be doing it. I appreciate that.
It's just, Fred, when the time is right, and now's the time, so I wanted to point
I
that out.
appreciate,
so
and
that
I'm,
you
I'm
know.
personally thanking you. I really
you're welcome,
appreciate
Fred.
that, because
Thank you.
it feels very draconian. I don't know, just like, well, you can't ask questions, or if you do, we have to have them in a back room, and the fact that we can have these conversations.
It wouldn't be a back room. It's just,
I'm
like I came to your house uninvited, you told me that one time. We just chatted about stuff.
yeah, understood.
And that's all it
But I
is.
think some things need to be out. I'm just making a comment. Denise, I'll just address you as the chairperson, but most of the residents don't know what goes on in this township because we're buried in our children and all the other things that we all face every day.
That's why
So,
we're videotaping them now, so everybody can watch. We just started that in 2020. so
yeah, I think it's great. Thanks.
That's why we do it.
But my point is, and to get the word out, I mean, people do read the report and so forth and so on. If we're having conversations and questions asked and answered within, a private setting, if you will, that information doesn't become public. That was my really biggest concern, was the fact that we're getting answers to questions that don't get to the rest of the community.
I think now's your chance. if you have more,
Understood. That was
and
just the point I was
I'm trying to
making.
help you.
I
with that.
appreciate that. Thank you.
I wanted to thank you too, Liz. This is why we're frustrated. Back to being civil. We are frustrated, and I am a Upper Gwynedd Republican Committee member, and at the first meeting, I said, I'm going around to my district and I'm talking to people. If they ask me questions and I don't have answers, and I would prefer it in a corporate setting so that it's out there, I have to be able to give them the correct answers. So that is why we're frustrated, because we have questions. We love Upper Gwynedd. You love Upper Gwynedd. That's why you're serving. You're not making money off of this. You're giving a lot of time. You're putting a lot of work into it because you love our community. I've lived here for 30 years. Like I've said to you before, I've rebuilt my house. I'm planning to stay. But I have to be able to tell people the correct information, because if I don't know it correctly, I don't want to go out and explain it. If people ask me questions, I have to know. So that is why, but I appreciate it. If I know the time and the place that's appropriate for the questions, then that would be a good
And
thing for me. But
about-
I wanted to thank you for giving this opportunity tonight, Liz.
About 18 years ago, I was involved in an issue happening around where I live in West Point. And I would come to meeting after meeting after meeting. There was nobody here. Was Van, maybe toward the end, probably not. But I would come to meetings just like you, and I would walk out frustrated as well. But what I did learn is when you say things, when you comment, that does go on the record for people to hear. And it's not that we're hiding anything from you with answers. It's maybe we don't have all the information that you're asking us, because there's a lot. Van said there's some of us that don't know about this Walters group. I'm right there with you, because I don't know what you see, what I hear. We're learning this together right now.
Okay.
And so if there's questions that I might have on all this, I'm going to, me, I'm going to ask them, or I'm going to say something about it so that I can learn with you, because I know how frustrating it can be. But one other thing, I'm sorry, legally, sometimes we can't, and you have to respect that we can't legally, and the board before us every board is like that. And as a resident, I know firsthand how frustrating that is. You want an answer, you want it. And legally, sometimes our hands are tied. It's not that we're hiding it from you, it's that we can't.
Well, I understand that, and I appreciate your humility and being willing to, if you say, we'll get back to you at the next meeting with the answer, perfectly fine. So,
Would you is that an option, Lauren, where they ask a question and then at the next meeting we can, if they're here, answer it? Or, I don't know if that's appropriate. I don't know.
Ultimately, the public speaking rules it's up to the 5 elected officials to develop their public speaking rules. But there the questions that are, a lot of the questions that are being asked, I would say, no, it's inappropriate and premature to be answering questions about that specific application.
Oh, yeah.
It's not in front of the board.
Yeah, it's
Well, I'm
that
not
one.
just
And
Yeah.
talking about
I've
that. There's
advised- I've advised the
there's
5 of
other
them
things
not
that
to
we
answer
have
those
questions
questions.
on. So but if you don't have the answer, then if you could get back to me, I appreciate it. Thank you.
We absolutely will, Linda. Thank you.
Isaac, take it away.
Just one note. I've been around a long time, haven't I?
Thank you, Sandra. On the engineering side this evening, the reports included with the packet of some ongoing land developments that are in construction, some other grading permits that we review. A little feedback. Just to highlight 2 things this month. One is the MS4 program that the township has. Just a reminder of kind of the timetable on that each year. So the annual reporting period goes from June to June. So this year's reporting period, just 21 to 22, concluded June 30th. From then until September, we put together our township's annual report to the DEP, updates them on stormwater projects that the township is pursuing, that is completed. When we see our smaller grading permits, stormwater management practices they incorporate, that all gets tracked and reported to the DEP. So that's ongoing, the annual report. And as part of that, this year, the DEP has sent out to all the municipalities some updates for the stormwater ordinance. And that's one thing mentioned in tonight's agenda, and something we'll be looking to move along also to just update with some of their 2022 updates in some sections, and to clarify some items to make it easier for residents and also applicants to understand what they're looking at when they look at our stormwater ordinance. Another item to mention tonight is our road program. So part of our annual road program is our liquid fuels funding from PennDOT. So when our process goes through and we award a contract to this year's contractor is JDM, the liquid fuels project approval has to be completed by PennDOT before we issue them to start the work. That was finally resolved and completed as of today. So we'll look to coordinate with the contractor, with staff, to get that year's program underway. It's always the goal to finish before the school year starts, but understanding we're already in mid-July, we'll just be working with staff and the contractor to minimize disruption and get all the work done that we have in the contract for this year. Other than those 2 items, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Any questions? Okay. Moving on, the section regarding finance, personnel, and administration, we have all the staff departmental reports, which we will include for the consent agenda, as well as the special meeting minutes from June 7th and the regular meeting minutes from June 13th and 21st. Those will all be consent agenda items next week. The next item is approval of the township manager to execute an agreement with GovHR, which, if you just give me a moment to catch myself. I'm looking for approval from the Board of Commissioners to approve this agreement. Over the past 3 years since I've been manager here, I've been looking at our non-uniform salaries each year to make sure that they're competitive. And I'm sure, as everyone knows, really the labor market is a tough place right now for employers. There's the Great Resignation, there's people choosing different careers. There's a lot of things that are very pro-employee, which is great. We want to make sure at Upper Gwynedd Township, we're competitive and able to retain our employees and that we're compensating them fairly. So we're looking for an outside vendor to do a study. This would just be for non-uniform employees because uniform employees have contractual salaries. And it will give us some information to look forward at budget time to look at salaries as we do each year. I did get 3 quotes for this type of work from 3 different HR companies. And this study was the cheapest of the 3, as well as I participated in one of their studies because we were a like community to benchmark against. So I've seen their product and I think it's really great. It's going to give us, for each position in our non-uniform staff, a minimum, maximum, median range of an appropriate salary. It's not saying that we will instantly make changes to those salaries, but we will have the data to make a data-driven decision. Does anyone have any questions on the board? No? Okay, that will be for your consideration next week. Next up, we are looking for a lease. There's a 63-month lease agreement with Key Business Solutions for our postage meter. And again, Nate's saving us money. He takes it very seriously that he's always negotiating amazing deals for us. I keep saying I'm going to take him the next time I buy a car. So it'll, I can't imagine the deals he gets. It will greatly reduce our costs. Depending on which option we go with, there's a reduction of $2,000 or $600 future savings on our machine. So it's kind of a routine item, but it'll be up for your consideration next week. And then I do have a decision item, Commissioner Hull, that I would like to pass back to you. This is a confidential item as it relates to personnel matters. So that's why if you tried to click on it, it wasn't linked publicly, and I'd like to ask for your motion.
Sure. Do we have a motion to approve the agreement between Upper Gwynedd Township and employee number 47? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Oh,
What?
yes, sorry,
supposed to be a
Commissioner
roll call?
Carter. No, just, I didn't hear
Oh,
Catherine's
sorry.
vote. Yeah,
Do you want me to say it again? Oh,
there we go. Little
There it
delay
is.
sometimes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Carter. We have one item in the public safety agenda regarding authorization to advertise ordinance 2022-04. This is related to paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia. The police department routinely encounters people with small amounts of marijuana and related paraphernalia. Basically, this amendment to the ordinance would allow the officers to charge with a summary non-traffic, oh no, that's what they used to do. They used to charge people with a non-traffic citation of disorderly conduct in lieu of the misdemeanor charges. This ordinance would sort of codify that, so the police aren't having to make a judgment call every time. It allows them to make it a ticket each time. Did I explain that correctly, Chief? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. So that would be a decision item for next week, and we have one more decision item for tonight under, oh, sorry, Commissioner Carter, did you have a question? No. Chief Duffy is going to come answer your question.
So creating this ordinance would give us a more appropriate summary section to charge for minor paraphernalia. Currently, our really only option, proper section is a misdemeanor charge. People get handcuffed, fingerprinted, photographed, and they get a record for a small amount of paraphernalia. Most of the time, we don't feel that's appropriate in the situations that we're given. So this ordinance allows the township to have a separate section because the state hasn't done that yet. But this is allowed by ordinance. Do we have larger amounts of paraphernalia, or we're dealing with something where sales are involved? Totally different situation, and we wouldn't be charging this. We'd be charging the appropriate misdemeanor or felony charges.
Thanks, Chief. You're way better suited to discuss that than I am. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Carter? Yeah. Okay, great. Next up is another decision item, so I'm going to toss it back to President Hull. But before I do, I will just quickly talk about it. So Sergeant Brinkman, we just mentioned earlier, he's being recognized for 25 years of service, and he has decided to voluntarily enter our Deferred Retirement Option Program, otherwise known as DROP. So this item is required to be able to start that process for Sergeant Brinkman, which is also a contractual obligation that we allow officers to enter the DROP.
Do we have a motion to ratify Resolution 21-2022, granting Officer Brinkman acceptance into DROP effective July 1st, 2022?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So item number 24 is a Merck waiver request, regular business there. So we're asking to put that on the consent agenda, as well as the first escrow release for Whately Walk. After that, next week, you guys will be considering a waiver of land development for the Merck BO Building O2P Boiler 11 addition. This project qualifies for a waiver of land development per our ordinance, which has very specific regulations for why the board might consider waiving land development. And there's a lot of information in the packet about it, but it's an addition, and the Plan Review Committee has reviewed it back in March of this year. Are there any questions? Okay. Item number 27, we are not ready to discuss yet. We may discuss it at next meeting, so I left it on the agenda. We're just still working out the particulars with the applicant. And with the Sunshine Law, we never want to not put it on the agenda and then not have a chance to speak about it. So maybe I'll have more information for you about that next week. If not, it would be in August. Also, for the consent agenda, I would like to recommend items 28 and 29, which are sort of routine business with stormwater operations and maintenance agreement and an encroachment agreement. And we're at another decision item. Again, sometimes we make decision items on the agenda due to timeliness, and this is an example of a timeliness issue. Everyone's heard about our funding for the Haynes Run 2040 grant, which is the construction portion of the funding. We are looking to sign that agreement. It's a pretty simple item, but I can't sign it if you guys don't tell me I can.
Do we have a motion to approve the agreement for the Haynes Run Monco 2040 Grant Award?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
We heard I almost just said pretty much a lot. That's not even a sentence. We heard a lot about the streetlight procurement program earlier. Did anyone have any questions? No? Okay. The heating fuel bid award is item 32. This is similar to the MICU item. We are still reviewing the bids. Well, there's only one bidder, but we're reviewing that and should have information for the board at next week's meeting. Item number 33, I'd like to highlight special attention on this item because our township intern wrote this BOC action memo for the board, and he is in attendance today, probably very embarrassed that I've called him out, but we're very excited to have him with us, helping us and learning about local government, which is a really wonderful thing. So we are looking to start applying for grants for construction funding for portion of our trails through the township. This specific section of trail would go from Dickerson Road up along Mill Road through the middle school property and connect over to the elementary school at Gwynedd. So it's a great section of trail. It's part of our PICO Power Line Trail project. We recently did get approval from PICO to do that, which is very exciting because we thought it was touch and go there for a while. The best thing about this grant that we are applying for is it does not require any matching funds. So those are the best of the grants. So hopefully our application is competitive and we're funded. The total project costs are close to $1 million, with the construction being around $800,000, and that's what we'd be applying for. Any questions?
Happy to hear that finally coming through.
I know it's exciting to be talking about like construction applications. And also, we're not finished the feasibility study for the PICO Trail, but that's why we selected this portion of trail, which mostly goes through the school district property and has less of a residential impact. There is a slight residential impact along Mill Road, but it's removed from the housing areas. So we thought it was sort of a good project for this starting segment. Okay, any questions? No, okay. Next up, we're looking for authorization to advertise the bid for the Newport Lane Basin retrofit project. The residents, oh, okay, hi, sorry, it's always so surprising when you ask a question from the sky. It's okay.
Part of the title says that it's a safe route.
Oh.
Safe route to school trail.
Oh, the safe, yeah, so it's not.
What makes it a safe route?
So by installing a 10 to 12-foot wide trail, it becomes a safer way for kids to walk to school. And especially when you connect schools, we call it like a safe route to school because it does really increase the application's visibility with the grant funding sources as well. If you can say we're connecting, school-age children in a safe crossing, there would be an installation of a crosswalk across, not Beaver at that point, North Wales Road, over to the district property. So we usually say something's a safe route to school if it's connecting schools with neighborhoods. Sure. Back to the Newport Basin retrofit. This is a project that's part of our capital plan for this year, as well as an MS4 requirement for the Skipback watershed, which we're always looking for projects in the Skipback because we crushed it with the Wissahickon already. So this project, the neighbors around the property are aware of it. We've done all of the preliminary engineering work and we are now ready to go out to bid. Did I miss anything?
I'll just add that the Skipback watershed, we partner with Merck for a lot of our TMDL plan, which is our overall stormwater planning for our projected years ahead. And this project is one that the township has property that can be a real good basin retrofit and attacks the reduction goals for pollutants into that waterway system. So with partnership with some other projects that we do with Merck, this is really one that kind of rose to the top that the township can check off on our side and really meet those goals. So it's a real good project for that Skipback watershed.
Any questions? Excuse me, any questions on this item? Okay. Next up, 35 is another one where, this is a big agenda this month. We just had a few things we couldn't get ready just in time, but I think this one is going to be ready for next week. So Isaac, do you want to just give a little update? This is a required change to our stormwater management language per the DEP, I'm assuming?
Correct. Yeah, the DEP with our MS4 program, every X amount of years, they have updated language for the ordinance just to have it with current innovative ways to manage stormwater. It cleans up some of the language in regards to maintenance and operation. You see a lot of these O&M agreements. So it really clarifies how that's actually followed through with after something gets built. And that was lacking a bit in previous versions of the ordinance. So a lot of municipalities adopt what the DEP kind of rolls out as really the example ordinance and then adds a couple of things that make it personalized to the municipality. So that's basically what we're looking to do. As well, Upper Gwynedd has really two chapters, the Wissahickon and the Skipback watershed sections. It's a little tough to follow if you're just going to one or trying to find which one you may fall into. So as part of the updates that the DEP has for the language, we're also taking the opportunity to just clean up how you can find the information you're looking for when you go and find out where your location is and which watershed you'll have to address for any kind of requirements. So it should really be an overall improvement to those ordinance sections.
And this is something that the DEP is requiring every town to pass, not just ours. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. By September, all the municipalities should have their ordinances sent to the DEP.
Great. Any questions? Okay, next up, it's exciting in this section, in Commissioner McNeely's section, there's two big components of our capital plan considered here. And so first was the Newport Lane, and then second is the Dickerson Road drainage improvements. This came from a call from residents for improvements in that area, which Isaac studied for almost 2 years, I'd say, to get to the correct solution with our Public Works Department. We've put it out to bid. The project did come in as almost everything, it's not just when you go to the grocery store, it's also when you try to buy asphalt or contractors, prices are just going up. And so this project did come in a bit over budget, but luckily it's it's really not lucky. We can't buy any vehicles, so all of our vehicle purchases this year, many of them were delayed. So we're going to shift funding and provide funding for this project, and Willard has decided to shift one of his vehicles to next year's budget. So that's how we'll accommodate the cost for this project, because originally we had budgeted $293,000. So this, with the alternate bid that allows for ADA ramps to be completed, will be about $80,000 over budget, and we're shifting off the truck that cost $120,000. So there's money to do it. It's important to this neighborhood of residents, and Isaac can speak more clearly about how the project is happening if anyone has any questions. But it's an installation of larger stormwater conveyance system. Oh, sounded like an engineer for a second there. Yeah.
Isaac, that was the meeting where we met via Zoom with all the residents.
Yeah, during
in that
COVID.
during COVID. And they all seemed pretty happy with the improvements that we would make. So that was, God, that seems like a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago. It was in the throes of I think it was in 2019 or 2020, like the beginning of 2020 that we had that. Yeah.
And I think they'll be
That's correct.
excited.
Yeah, we did meet with the neighborhood that really is most affected by that.
Yep.
There's, water that really kind of all comes down to a single point there and then tries to make its way to the creek. So the analysis we've done, the layout should really help water get through that area and keep it down from coming up towards the homes there. So we're looking forward to this one.
I'm sure the residents are too.
I think so. We had our pre-bid at the site for contractors, obviously, to look at it before they would bid on the project. And we had a few of the homeowners come out and they even asked some of the potential bidders questions too. So
Perfect.
they've been involved in every step of the way.
And you'll see more projects like that coming before the board. There's several different areas in the township that we're looking to improve drainage. So next up in the wastewater, sorry, did anyone have any questions on that? Okay, in the wastewater section, there's a change order for BSI for the WIP pump station electrical work. This is not an emergency action. It's just part of the cleanup from the completion of the WIP project. So I'd like to move that to the consent agenda for next week as well. And then there'll be the open and paid invoices, and then we'll be finished.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have anything else? Catherine? Okay. Yes. Yes, we can hear you, Catherine. That's okay.
I would just like to do a shout out for our police department. That's okay.
Sure.
Officer Fred Lynch, our DARE officer. He is currently at the Pennsylvania State Police Camp Cadet, where he is working alongside with state troopers and other local officers who administer the program. Camp Cadet is open to youth ages 12 to 15, and its structure is similar to training at the police academy. The camp focuses on discipline, self-esteem, teamwork, drug and alcohol education, violence prevention, and many other issues facing our today's youth. This is Officer Lynch's 11th year with the Camp Cadet program. Officer Lynch also ran our own local junior police academy for several years, which is also currently in session and now done in partnership with the North Penn YMCA and the North Penn Police Athletic League Department. We also have a huge shout out for our Deputy Chief Ted Viola, has been nominated to attend the FBI National Academy and is expected to attend the 284th session this fall in Quantico, Virginia. The FBI National Academy is a 10-week course of study for the United States and international law enforcement commanders nominated by their agency heads because of demonstrated leadership qualities. The program provides coursework in intelligence theory, terrorism, management science, law, behavioral science, law enforcement communication, and forensic science. There is also an intense physical training component. Only about 1% of law enforcement officers get to experience this National FBI Academy. Prior Upper Gwinnett graduates include Chief Duffy, class of 2004, Sergeant Gillen, class of 2012. We are very excited to have Deputy Chief represent us at this prestigious school. I just want everyone.
Thank you, Catherine. That's great news. Thank you for sharing that. I just had one last thing to end on a happy note. I don't know if anybody saw the front page of the newspaper today, but these are Girl Scouts, the Corpus Christi Girl Scouts, all the way brownies, juniors, and cadets. And they purchased trees from our EAC on the Arbor Day sale. And they purchased that with their Girl Scout cookie money. And then they planted the trees, they learned how to plant them. They're learning why trees are important. And they're also learning how to grow them, how to take care of them while they're growing. They are doing this for Corpus Christi's Prayer Garden. I don't know if any of you have ever visited. It's a beautiful area behind Corpus Christi. But what I think is so impressive about this is because I, as a former Girl Scout and has a daughter who was a Girl Scout for many years, when it came time to deciding what to do with the cookie money, it was often things like, let's go to Build-A-Bear. Let's go get ice cream. Let's go to the indoor water park. Girl Scout cookie sales are a lot of work, and the troops don't necessarily get a whole lot of money for it, but it's a lot of work, and the girls typically, understandably, are excited to spend it on something fun. So the fact that these girls decided to spend that precious cookie money on buying trees, supporting the township's EAC, on beautifying their space where they have their meetings at the prayer garden, and doing something so environmentally sound is just so impressive that I just wanted to share it. And I just wanted to say, kudos, girls. Thank you so much. You're definitely an inspiration to all of us. So on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening, and the meeting is adjourned.